straight hair, the first thing I do is I control for the hair. What that means is just to wet it a little bit and allow the hairs to be coated using my other hand to comb through it. Reason I do this is when the hair comes in and it's dry, it's already formed, it does its own behavior. So now I want to make it do what I want it to do. I didn't go in with my comb first because I find using my hand is a little more efficient to make sure that the water goes through the hair perfectly. Here I'm just talking to him, trying to figure out what type of style he usually gets. You get it combed over to the side, you get it front, the side, or the back. Usually what we're gonna do here is basically even out the top and then give it a little texture so that he can mess it up, have a messy top, and just fade the sides. The consultation is everything, because when you know exactly what this person wants and you understand how to get there, you guys are working together to get to a certain goal, instead of just slapping on a cut that they may or may not want. Now, this is typically what I do. I take out a clipper over comb. Many of you may ask, why use a clipper over comb instead of using a 2 right away? That's also an option people use, but I found that using a clipper over comb allows for more tension and allows for a cleaner cut. I get to see my results faster, and the more efficient you get with this, I think is actually the better technique. Really what the clipper over comb is doing here is allowing for us to create an overview of the fade that we're going to be doing, the haircut that we're doing. And usually I just do around the parietal ridge like that, but I'm going to be cutting down the sides just to prep us for the next step. Every time you do these steps, you got to make sure you're understanding what is going to come next. So I know I'm going to fade the sides here. Instead of just leaving that hair like that, I'm just going to keep it as low as possible, understanding that this comb only goes as far as a 1. So I can keep this comb on the side of the head flat. Still won't get low enough for me to have an issue because it's a 1. And I usually keep my lever all the way open when I'm doing this. If you're a little scared, if you're a little too, if you're not too confident with doing this, you could slap a 1 guard on there, close it, or slap a half guard on there. And paying attention to really making that side go straight up. Next thing I do is I focus on the top, and the hair is a little bit dry in the front, so I gotta just wet it a little more after that process. When you're using the clipper, you don't want to wet it too much. I just wet it so I can form the hair in the way that I want it to be. Now I'm using a shear, so the more wet without dripping, the better. Now cutting the top, I know a lot of people have an issue with this one. I'm typically setting my highest point at this moment. I usually do it for the whole front because the front is really what most people recognize initially. So I'm just making sure that he understands where exactly I'm going to be cutting. And as the tip says, usually cut to the knuckle, but to save time, I go past it. Problem is, when you go past that, you have a chance of cutting yourself. So if you're not too skilled with the shears, I wouldn't pass my first knuckle. Now, if you notice when I'm making my partings, my middle finger is touching the comb and the head at the same time, holding down the hairs so that I can make sure that I can create that separation and have a clean parting like so. After I've set that first guideline, come down the middle and I'm making sure that it goes straight back. And notice how my shear is coming from the front of his face going to the back. If I was on the other side, my shears would be coming from the back and going to the front. That would make it harder for me to make cuts. So this is an intentional position right here, making sure that I can cut efficiently and I'm not working against myself. Now that I've created the guideline in the middle, I'm going to be combing the hair over to one side, and I know all those hairs in the middle are cut to that side, so it doesn't really matter how the hair is combed or whatever. I know where my position is, I know where my panel is, it's right there in the middle. So I'm just combing it over to one side. Could have done a better job of combing all that hair over, but I'm just getting to the haircut. and I'm just following the guide all the way down. Notice how I'm holding my shears a little differently than I was before, just to make sure that my ergonomics is well positioned. I can make sure my elbow is down and I'm not straining my rotator cuff. Now if you notice that I'm chopping my shears, it's not one quick slice. There are two reasons for that. The most power there is in a shear is closest to where your fingers are. The further you get away from your fingers is the weaker that cut is. These shears aren't the sharpest, they need a little bit of sharpening. So if you have shears typically that aren't, Japanese steel or cobalt or anything that's recently sharpened, you can use this chopping method to make sure that the power of the shear is optimized and you keep chopping through. Now if you just do one slice, what can happen is the hairs at the base or the closest to your fingers are cut sharp, but the hairs furthest get pushed and you don't get as clean a cut as you would have. Notice how I'm just evening it out the top here. Now again, this is just a rough draft, a rough shape. I'm just making sure everything is set up nicely for my fade. Now if you notice, when I did this cut, I only did the sides and the top. Now we're going to see some long hairs in between that point. And that's why we're using this method here to blend the two. It's a square shape where we're going straight up the head. Now when you come around, you're going to see I'm going to switch my grip like so. And this is done again to keep my elbows down. And you want to pull away from the calic right there, because if you cut it any shorter, it would start being stubby. You want the hairs to lay down and keep that shape. Now if you notice at the top of the crown that the hair right there is sticking up a little bit, that's okay, because we're going to be doing a messy look anyway. And here I'm just doing a little bit of cleanup work, but just showing you how to use the shears. I typically wouldn't do this because it's it's a little bit of a waste. We're going to come through with the clippers, but this is exactly how I would blend using a shear, just to refine some cuts, keeping the base of the blade to the base of the comb and just using my thumb as a motor.